Have you ever walked into Wendy's already knowing exactly what you're going to order? If so, you're not alone, and that's exactly what makes today's countdown so interesting. Here's the surprising part. Some of the restaurant's most popular menu items aren't necessarily the ones that leave customers the happiest. In fact, a few have built their reputation more on familiarity than on consistently delivering a great experience. That's not to say Wendy's isn't one of the strongest names in fast food. It absolutely is. The chain has earned millions of loyal fans with its fresh beef, square burgers, and menu staples that people keep coming back for year after year. But just because an item has been around forever, or looks incredible on the menu board, doesn't automatically make it the smartest thing to order. Today, we're counting down 7 Wendy's menu items that often disappoint expectations, followed by 5 that almost never let customers down. Some of these picks may surprise you, and by the time we reach the number 1 spot, you'll see why one of Wendy's most iconic menu items continues to divide opinion. So before your next trip to the drive-thru, you might want to watch until the end because the best value on the menu isn't necessarily the one getting all the attention. Let's begin with a side dish that sounds almost impossible to get wrong. Chili cheese fries seem like the perfect comfort food. Crispy fries topped with Wendy's signature chili and finished with warm, creamy cheese sauce. It looks like 3 great menu items coming together in one irresistible package. The menu photos certainly make it look that way. Thick chili, melted cheese, golden fries peeking out underneath. It's the kind of food that practically sells itself before you've even placed your order. But here's where expectations start colliding with reality. The moment those hot fries disappear under a layer of chili and cheese, the countdown begins. Fries are at their best when they're crisp, but steam trapped beneath all those toppings quickly changes their texture. By the time many customers actually start eating them, the crunch that made the fries appealing has almost disappeared, replaced by something much softer than expected. Ironically, the flavors aren't really the problem. Wendy's chili has built a loyal following for good reason, and the cheese sauce delivers exactly the creamy richness people expect. Instead of enjoying crispy fries with flavorful toppings, you're often eating fries that have absorbed so much moisture they've lost the very quality that made them worth ordering in the first place. There's also the question of value. For only a little more, many customers could order fries and chili separately, adding the chili themselves whenever they're ready to eat. That simple change keeps the fries crisp for longer and gives you complete control over how much chili and cheese ends up in every bite. It's one of those rare situations where doing a tiny bit of the work yourself actually creates a better meal. Psychologists even have a name for this behavior. It's called the convenience effect. People naturally choose the option that's already assembled because it feels easier, even if it isn't necessarily the best experience. Restaurants understand this extremely well, and menu combinations like chili cheese fries continue selling because convenience often wins over optimization. They're not a terrible menu item by any means, they simply sound better than they consistently perform. And speaking of menu items that promise something special, our next pick goes in a completely different direction. The pretzel bacon pub cheeseburger doesn't just try to be another burger. It wants to feel like something you'd order at a trendy neighborhood gastropub instead of a drive-thru. From the moment you read the name, expectations start climbing. A pretzel bun, beer cheese sauce, applewood smoked bacon, crispy fried onions, Munster cheese. Every ingredient is carefully chosen to make this burger sound premium. When Wendy's first introduced it, customers were excited because it felt different from anything else on the menu. It wasn't trying to compete with a classic cheeseburger. It was selling an experience. And sometimes, it absolutely delivers. But this burger depends on perfect balance, and that's where things become unpredictable. Too much beer cheese sauce and the entire sandwich starts tasting overwhelmingly salty. too little, and one of its signature ingredients almost disappears. If the fried onions lose their crispness or the pretzel bun softens from trapped steam, the textures that made the burger unique begin blending together. Instead of tasting distinct layers of flavor, every bite can start feeling like one giant mouthful of cheese, bacon. That's not because any individual ingredient is bad. It's because premium burgers ask every ingredient to perform perfectly at the same time, and that's much harder to achieve consistently in a fast food kitchen. Consumer psychologists call this the novelty effect. Our brains naturally become excited by foods that seem different or more sophisticated than the ordinary. A pretzel bun instantly feels more interesting than a regular bun, and beer cheese sounds more exciting than long before taking the first bite. Your expectations have already been raised. The higher those expectations climb, the harder they become to satisfy. That's the challenge with elaborate fast food creations. The more moving parts they have, the more opportunities there are for one small thing to throw the entire experience out of balance. To be clear, the pretzel bacon pub cheeseburger isn't a bad burger. In fact, when everything comes together perfectly, it can be one of the most satisfying burgers Wendy's has to offer. The problem is that perfectly isn't guaranteed every time, especially when you're paying a premium price. And that's why it lands near the bottom of today's countdown. But if you think these first two entries were surprising, the next one is even more deceptive because it wears the. If the first two items on our list taught us anything, it's that great marketing and great food aren't always the same thing. Sometimes the biggest disappointment doesn't come from bad flavor, it comes from expectations that are simply too high. And now we're entering the part of the countdown where the gap between appearance and reality becomes even more obvious. These next menu items aren't necessarily unpopular. In fact, they're ordered every single day by thousands of customers. But once you look a little closer, it's easy to see why they don't always deliver the experience people think they're paying for. Coming in at number 5 is the taco salad, a menu item that has convinced countless people they're making a healthier choice. Think about it. The moment you hear the word salad, your brain immediately starts associating it with fresh, light, and nutritious. That's exactly what makes this menu item so appealing. At first glance, it looks like the perfect compromise. You get lettuce, tomatoes, beans, Wendy's famous chili, shredded cheese, crunchy tortilla chips, sour cream, and dressing, all served together in one colorful bowl. Compared to a burger and fries, it certainly looks like the responsible decision. But looks can be incredibly misleading. Once everything is mixed together, the fresh vegetables quickly become background players while the richer ingredients take over. The chili, cheese, sour cream, tortilla chips, and dressing dominate the flavor, and after sitting for just a few minutes, the lettuce begins losing its crispness while the chips soften under the warm chili. The result isn't a terrible meal, but it often isn't the fresh, satisfying experience people imagined when they ordered it. This is a perfect example of what's known as the health halo effect. When one part of a meal appears healthy, our brains naturally assume the entire meal must be healthier than it really is. Restaurants have understood this psychology for years, and customers continue falling for it because the word salad creates an expectation before the first bite is even taken. That's what earns the taco salad a place on today's list. It's not disappointing because it's bad, it disappoints because many people expect something completely different. But if that surprises you, our next pick proves just how powerful one ingredient can be when it comes to influencing buying decisions. Coming in at number 4 is the Big Bacon Classic. Bacon has become one of the easiest ways to make almost any burger sound more exciting. The moment customers see the word on the menu, they instinctively assume they're getting a premium experience. That's exactly what the Big Bacon Classic promises. On paper, it has everything you'd want: a fresh beef patty, crispy applewood smoked bacon, American cheese, lettuce, tomato, onion, pickles, ketchup, and mayonnaise. It sounds like the perfect upgrade over a standard cheeseburger. But here's the surprising part. The bacon often doesn't transform the burger nearly as much as customers expect. The beef still provides most of the flavor, the cheese still adds the richness, and the vegetables continue doing what they've always done. The bacon becomes more of a supporting ingredient than the star attraction the menu suggests. Sometimes it's perfectly crisp and evenly distributed, giving every bite that smoky flavor people are hoping for. Other times, you barely notice it's there. That's one of the biggest challenges with ingredient-heavy burgers. Consistency becomes much harder to achieve. Consumer behavior experts call bacon a premium Q. Simply adding it to the description instantly makes customers believe the product is more luxurious and more valuable, even if the actual eating experience changes very little. That's why so many people happily pay extra for bacon without stopping to ask whether it's really improving that the Big Bacon Classic isn't a bad burger. It simply doesn't always feel dramatically different from cheaper. And speaking of paying extra for something that sounds more exciting than it often tastes, our number 3 pick Baconator fries arrive with one of the strongest brand names in fast food already attached to them. Unapologetically indulgent approach to beef, cheese, and bacon. So extending that famous name to an order of fries seemed like a guaranteed success. The idea is simple. Take Wendy's fries, cover them with warm cheese sauce, sprinkle on bacon pieces, and from a marketing standpoint, it's brilliant because customers already trust the brand before they've even taken a bite. But once again, reality introduces a familiar problem. Just like chili cheese fries earlier in the countdown, Baconator fries begin losing their appeal almost inside the container, and the bacon gradually loses its crispness. Then there's the issue of flavor fatigue. The first few bites are undeniably rich and satisfying, but because nearly every ingredient occupies the same savory, salty flavor profile, the experience can become repetitive surprisingly quickly. Instead of each bite bringing something new, they all begin tasting remarkably similar. That's the challenge with foods built entirely around indulgence. More toppings don't automatically create a better eating experience. Sometimes they simply create more of the same. Yet Baconator fries remain incredibly popular because the Baconator name carries enormous emotional weight. Customers associate it with treating themselves, and that expectation makes the product feel more exciting before, in many cases, though, ordering regular fries alongside a Baconator burger ends up delivering a more balanced. It's another reminder that bigger isn't always better. And if you think these 3 menu items generated strong opinions, just wait until you see the top 2. One has become a fast food icon that's fueled decades of nostalgia, while the other is the very burger most. Both are hugely popular, but both also carry expectations so high that almost no meal could ever live up to them. That's where the countdown gets really interesting. After looking at the menu items that sometimes struggle to match expectations, it's time to look at the other side of the story. Because the truth is, Wendy's has built a massive following for a reason. When the chain focuses on simplicity, balance, and consistency, some menu items become the kind of food people order without hesitation. They don't need flashy advertising. They don't need a complicated name. They simply deliver the experience customers are hoping for. These are the items that have earned loyalty over time, not because they're the biggest or most expensive, but because they understand something important about fast food. People don't just want something exciting. They want something they can trust. Coming in at number 5 is the baked potato. Now, at first glance, a baked potato doesn't seem like the most exciting item on a fast food menu. In a world filled with burgers, nuggets, and loaded fries, it almost feels like the quiet option sitting in the corner waiting to be noticed. But that's exactly what makes it interesting. The baked potato doesn't try to be something it's not. It doesn't rely on a long list of toppings or a clever marketing campaign. It simply focuses on doing one thing well. A hot, fluffy potato with a soft interior and a comforting texture that feels surprisingly different from most drive-through options. And unlike fries, which have a very small window before they lose their crispness, a baked potato holds its quality much longer. It doesn't become a completely different food after sitting for a few minutes. That reliability matters more than many people realize. In fast food, customers aren't only buying flavor, they're buying predictability. They want to know that if they order the same thing next month, they'll get a similar experience. The baked potato succeeds because it consistently provides exactly what people expect. There's also a psychological reason this item often surprises customers. When expectations are low, the experience has more room to impress. Nobody walks into Wendy's expecting a baked potato to become the highlight of their meal. But when they finally try one, many people discover that simple can sometimes be incredibly satisfying. It's a reminder that food doesn't always need to be overloaded to be enjoyable. Sometimes the best choice is the one that doesn't try too hard. Moving on to number 4, we have an item that proves a burger doesn't need to be massive to become a customer favorite. The Junior Bacon Cheeseburger has built a reputation by mastering something many restaurants struggle with: balance. It doesn't try to compete with oversized burgers covered in endless toppings. Instead, it focuses on the basics and gets those basics right. A beef patty, crispy bacon, melted cheese, lettuce, tomato, and classic sauces come together in a combination that feels familiar but satisfying. Every ingredient has a purpose. Nothing feels unnecessary. Nothing overwhelms the rest of the sandwich. And that balance is exactly why so many customers keep returning to it. One of the biggest advantages of the Junior Bacon Cheeseburger is value. It sits in that perfect middle ground where customers feel like they're getting something enjoyable without turning a quick meal into an expensive purchase. It's satisfying enough to stand on its own but flexible enough to pair with fries, nuggets, or a drink. That's a major reason it has become a reliable choice for regular Wendy's customers. There's also a strong nostalgia factor. For many people, this was the burger they ordered after school, during lunch breaks, or on late-night food runs. But unlike some nostalgic menu items that survive only because of memories, the Junior Bacon Cheeseburger continues earning repeat customers because the actual experience still holds up. It proves that bigger doesn't automatically mean better. Sometimes the perfect recipe isn't about adding more. It's about making sure every ingredient already there has a reason to exist. Now, if there's one category where Wendy's has always managed to compete strongly, it's chicken sandwiches. And coming in at number 3 is the spicy chicken sandwich. Long before spicy chicken became one of the biggest battles in fast food, Wendy's had already built a loyal. The reason is simple. It understands the difference between heat and flavor. A great spicy sandwich isn't just about making customers reach for a drink after every bite. It's about creating a balance where the spice enhances the food instead of overpowering it. Wendy's version succeeds because the seasoning brings personality without completely hiding the chicken itself. The crispy coating provides texture, the chicken provides substance, and the toppings help create a familiar sandwich experience that customers recognize immediately. Another reason it remains popular is consistency. When someone orders a spicy chicken sandwich, they generally know what they're going to get. That confidence is incredibly valuable. Think about your own ordering habits. How often do you return to a restaurant because one specific item rarely disappoints you? That's exactly what creates loyal customers. People don't always chase the newest trend. Often, they return to the item they already trust. The spicy chicken sandwich has earned that trust by staying true to what customers expect. It doesn't need to reinvent itself every few months. It doesn't need a viral campaign to stay relevant. It simply delivers a familiar combination of crunch, flavor, and spice that keeps people coming back. But even after 3 strong entries, the top 2 spots are still waiting. And these final 2 are special because they represent something even more valuable than popularity. They represent confidence. They're the items customers order when they don't want to take a risk. The ones that have become part of people's regular Wendy's routine. We've reached the final 2 spots on the disappointing side of this countdown, and these are the menu items that create the strongest reactions. Not because everyone dislikes them, but because they have something even harder to overcome: massive expectations. When a food becomes iconic, customers aren't just judging the taste anymore. They're comparing every bite to years of memories, advertising, and stories they've heard from other people. And sometimes, that comparison can be almost impossible to win. Coming in at number 2 is the classic chocolate frosty. Now, before anyone disagrees, let's make one thing clear: the Frosty is not on this list because it's a bad dessert. Actually, it's the complete opposite. The Frosty is one of Wendy's most recognizable creations and has become part of the brand's identity. For many customers, it isn't just a dessert. It's a memory. It's something they had after school, something their parents bought them during childhood, or something they still order because it reminds them of simpler times. That's exactly why it creates such a fascinating situation. Nostalgia is powerful, but nostalgia also changes the way we judge things. When people hear the word Frosty, many imagine a rich, premium chocolate dessert similar to a thick milkshake or high-end ice cream. But the Frosty was never designed to be that. Its signature texture sits somewhere between soft serve and a milkshake. It's thick enough to eat with a spoon but smooth enough to slowly melt into a drinkable treat. That's part of what makes it unique. However, for someone trying it for the first time after hearing years of hype, the experience can feel different from what they imagined. The chocolate flavor is also intentionally subtle. It isn't an intense chocolate explosion. Instead, it has a lighter cocoa taste balanced with creamy sweetness. Longtime fans appreciate that classic flavor, but newcomers expecting something richer can sometimes feel underwhelmed. This is a perfect example of expectation bias. The more people praise something over time, the bigger the image becomes inside our minds. Eventually, we're no longer comparing the food to what it actually is. We're comparing it to the version we've created in our imagination. The Frosty doesn't fail because of its recipe. It simply has one of the toughest jobs in fast food: living up to decades of memories. And now we've arrived at number 1. The menu item that has carried Wendy's legacy, represents the founder's original vision, and remains one of the most recognizable burgers in the entire fast food industry. Coming in at number 1 is Dave's Single. This choice might surprise you because the Dave's Single is not a bad burger. In fact, on a good day, it delivers exactly what many people want from a classic cheeseburger. A square beef patty, fresh lettuce, tomato, pickles, onion, cheese, and signature sauces all come together in a familiar combination that has represented Wendy's for years. So why does it rank number 1? Because it carries one of the heaviest expectations on the entire menu. The moment customers see the name Dave's, they don't just see a burger. They see the symbol of Wendy's itself. They expect the ultimate Wendy's experience, the burger that represents everything the restaurant stands for. And when expectations are that high, even a solid burger can sometimes feel less impressive than expected. The biggest challenge comes down to value. Fast food prices have changed dramatically over the years, and signature burgers now compete with a much wider range of options. When customers pay more for a flagship burger, they naturally expect a noticeably better experience. But once they compare it with other choices on the menu, they may start wondering whether they're getting enough extra satisfaction for the additional cost. That's where the Dave's Single becomes interesting. It's reliable. It's familiar. It's safe. But safe doesn't always mean it's the best value. This is where something called the default effect comes into play. When people aren't sure what to order, they often choose the item that feels like the standard choice, the one that represents the restaurant. The Dave's single benefits from that every single day because the name itself creates confidence. Customers don't have to think about whether it's a good choice. They already believe it is. And that emotional connection is powerful. But when you're judging purely by satisfaction, value, and consistency, sometimes the famous option isn't automatically the winner. The Dave's single isn't number one because it's the worst burger Wendy's makes. It's number one because it has the biggest gap between what people expect and what it can realistically deliver every single time. And that's the interesting lesson from this entire half of the countdown. The items that disappoint aren't necessarily failures. Many of them are actually popular for a reason. The problem is that popularity creates pressure. The more famous something becomes, the more impossible it is to satisfy everyone. But here's the twist. Wendy's isn't built only on hype and nostalgia. Behind those heavily marketed items are several menu choices that consistently deliver without needing to convince anyone. They don't rely on flashy names. They don't need complicated ingredient lists. They simply do their job well. And in the second half of this countdown, we're looking at the 5 Wendy's menu items that almost never disappoint. Because sometimes the smartest order isn't the one getting the most attention. It's the one that quietly earns your trust every single time.